My name is Hunter Willis, and we've got Jay Lusk and Amie on the call with us today. And again, this is Buzzkill. Thanks for joining us. Today we're talking about building your IT team, right? The ideal kind of people and strategy for your IT team to be successful in the age of, everything that's going on, all the things that we've been talking about, digital transformation, change management, strategy when it comes to organizations, all these different things that are so important to think about. Ready to go when you guys are.
I'm ready. The technology's ready.
All right. Great. Fantastic. When Jay's ready and the technology's ready, you know that everything's ready to go.
Amie, welcome aboard.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about this topic.
Yeah, it's been an interesting. So Hunter and I, we kicked this off, 7 months ago now, Hunter? And in that time, we've recorded about a dozen episodes all about change management, about definition of success, about even, some standard and mundane topics like migration and planning. And the one thing that keeps coming up episode after episode is the amount of planning that's really involved in modern IT. And it's a different type of planning, right? In the past, we would spend 6 to 12 months creating a plan for a giant waterfall project, but it's all very insulated. It's an IT driven, technology focused thing that happens, and when they're done, we're done. And in the last, I'd say, at least, again, I'm mostly focused on public sector for those of you who haven't followed along with some of our episodes. In the last 5 or so years, the public sector space has really started embracing more of an agile approach, more of a we'll just stick with agile approach because my brain froze. But and so that idea of having all of that early planning and then rolling out tech and being done, it doesn't work anymore.
Right. It's really, and I think one of the things that you were trying to say there, Jay, is that, right, it's like it's on a continuing basis, right? You're not just doing one rollout, one implementation, right? It's like this thing that continues on. Change management is the name of the game, like a regular thing. So, Amie, in asking you these questions today, the first thing that we wanted to iterative. He's typing to me in the. That's fantastic. So one of the first things that we wanted to ask you, Amie, is that well, first off, I want to say, when we were prepping for this call, it was great because I asked Amie, I said, well, we're thinking about doing this and doing that. And she started talking, and it was like, I just wanted to be like, no, stop. That's exactly what we want you to say for the podcast. She just nailed it right out of the gate when she was just talking about this. So, but you talked to me about the first thing, and it was really interesting when I asked you, what are the kind of people that you think are really necessary for IT? Your first response to me was people that can keep the ball rolling, pretty much, right? And that was really, really interesting. So before you answer the question, though, can you just give us a little bit of background about yourself? Say hi, introduce yourself, and then answer the question. Sorry.
Sure. And I'm glad that you remember what we talked about, because I was thinking to myself, what did we talk about again? I don't remember. But I remember it being a good conversation. So yes, my name is Amie Seisay, CEO and founder of Seisay IT Solutions. And we have clients and partnerships, customers in the private industry and also in the public sector as well. So of course, it really just depends on the client of what you decide to offer as a solution. We work with small companies like 10 people in a company to larger organizations that maybe have like 45,000 users spread across the entire US. So that means that we have to kind of sometimes tailor what we provide as a service. A lot of it is doing a lot of business process automation, helping companies work more efficiently using the Microsoft 365 apps and products. And then we also build public-facing websites as well, especially for companies that might hit a growth in size, and then they realize that we need to have a public presence online. So that's usually when we get those clients that need to have a public-facing website, and we configure their domains, and we might route mail traffic to Microsoft 365 and,
Sure.
have the public facing site and like WordPress. So as it relates to what we were talking about for IT teams, one of the things that we see that is very successful when working on a development of some type of solution is having sprints. And what we'll do is the 2-week sprints where we are always showing the customer at the end of the sprint, like the progress that we've made. And what we were also kind of discussing is it's always good to not have just one technical person on the team,
Right.
because technology is changing all the time. And what I've noticed more so in the private industry, where the technical person is just expected to just get the work done, is that they're not really given time to actually learn. And so it's changing all the time. You can't have someone just getting the work done and there's that single person dependency. And it's kind of hard because they don't have anyone to kind of like bounce ideas off of. Even if the second person is not necessarily building an app, they could still provide perspectives on how to make the other person's life a little easier when they're trying to build something versus being stuck in their own little corner.
Yeah, it's funny you say. I just want to say, like, I've talked to like giant companies where they only have like one person that knows how to write scripts, and I'm like, okay. He's like, yeah, I guess I can do a PowerShell script and build all this stuff and do the thing to help this other thing happen. Guys, okay, yeah, I'll do that. And there's no one. Everyone else is like, okay, thanks, person.
Right. But what about that new thing that just came out like 2 days ago
Exactly.
that they didn't hear about? When you think about all the changes that are rolling out all the time, there's no way one person can keep up. So we actually have someone on our team now that is more so dedicated to just researching and looking online at the updates, what just came out, right? And what makes it even more interesting is that if you're in different cloud environments, releases happen at different intervals. So one of the things that someone asked me about when I was doing a webinar that was specific to the government space was, well, how do we know, like, what's a good strategy for how to manage those releases? Because the end users are going to find features before the technical team does.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right? So how do you manage that? And one of the things that helped out a lot for me was having a commercial tenant that is set to targeted release, where it will have all the updates before general availability. And then at least maybe you might know in the government space that, oh, by the way, this is coming out.
Yeah.
So those are one of the ways that we kind of help to manage, all the updates that are constantly happening.
Now, so you were just talking about M365 or Office 365, and for those of our listeners who aren't in the Microsoft space, I just wanted to clarify. So Microsoft Cloud is divided up into a couple of different things. The first thing you talked about is commercial tenant and having that early release cycle as an option, and that is a way that you can look at things in kind of a pre-release before they become what is called general availability, which you said. The other thing you talked about is the government side, which Microsoft has a bunch of clouds dedicated to specific uses. And in this case, we're talking about the national clouds for US government. There's GCC, GCC High, and DoD. And in those clouds, there are delays in the release cycle, primarily around security concerns and giving them time to have things tested by third parties to ensure that things being released to the government customers meet a certain level of scrutiny. And it's interesting that you brought that up, because it's really a good conversation to have with your customer, which is, first of all, let's decide in production, what level of security do you need, so we know what type of cloud environment we can go in. And then now that we've made that decision, let's talk about the other environments which you're not necessarily, which aren't on your radar, so that we can see what's coming in. And while it doesn't say this feature releases cloud commercial over here on day one, and 200 days later it's available in DoD, it's not that easy. But at least being aware gives you that knowledge of what might come and what it will look like, right? It's a really good point.
And so for building your tech team, so we have don't have just one person that's super technical, right? And we also have, make sure you've got someone or multiple people who have at least a significant portion of their job, if not all their job, is to learn the new stuff that's coming out and kind of keep also their, as part of that, keep their head down when it comes to things that could be a challenge for change management, which, like you said, the example of like people, and then what was the third one, Jay?
So the other thing you said, you passed through it really quickly. You need to have someone whose eye is on the long-term target and keeping you progressing in that direction. Did I hear that correct?
So that's what we talked about before, right? Because Amie was saying, the example that she gave me before the call was, hey, yeah, exactly. She said, and I'll just toss it up to jog her memory here, right? You said that in detail, you said that it's good to have someone either in your organization or a partner to the IT organization that's a stakeholder that will help you keep the ball rolling. And you gave for instance of there's a deployment or something's being developed and the organization has to spend some money to make that project move forward, right? And so many times the whole IT organization, or in your case, your company, is like trying to move the ball forward, and some stakeholders like, no, we got to do this other thing. We're not spending money on that right now, so you guys just chill. I know we're paying you tons of money to do all the work for this one thing, and you're not doing anything else, but just hang on for like, a year, right? So.
Yes, thank you for reminding me. So I was talking about the importance of having a product owner, and I'm so glad that you actually either have a great memory or you take detailed notes, whichever one it is.
It was a great point. I'd never heard that. Was fantastic. I was not expecting that answer. I was like, man, that's really, really smart. I was like, yeah,
it's valid because, especially since we are usually the outsiders coming into an organization, and there's certain times that we need things, right? Access to systems, or we might need a license to whether it's running some flows or a power app, building it, or whatever the case may be. You have to have a product owner that's internal to the organization that can reduce any roadblocks and get the approvals that are needed in order to keep the solutions being developed. So, a good product owner is going to be someone who can jump in on the daily stand-up meetings to kind of hear about the progress. If there's any challenges that the development team has, talk through those things to see if there's somebody else that they can communicate with to at the end of the day, make sure the stakeholders are happy with the solutions that are being developed, and also prioritizing tasks too, right? You have to have that one person, because if you have priorities coming in different directions, there's going to be confusion on what we're supposed to be doing next.
Yeah,
that's super important. So good organizers, people that can push the ball forward. I mean, part of that too, right? With all of this stuff, including especially change management, people, right? People that can have those conversations, tread lightly, know who to, you know.
And they should be the ones that are talking to the executive sponsors, so that the executive sponsors are actually understanding how these solutions are meeting goals for certain priorities for the organization. And what is so important that I cannot stress enough, especially if you're building an intranet, right? And there has to be someone at a high level who's leading the organization, who's actually communicating the staff that they need to go to the new intranet. if you don't have that and you have someone at a high level who's just sending out emails and attaching a document versus storing them in the intranet, it defeats the purpose, and then people are not going to use the systems that they're supposed to be using.
So another good piece of advice: have an executive sponsor.
Have an executive.
Right? For some of the organizations that we work with, that's good advice. But yeah.
What happens in the staff meetings, right? It's, I'm going to send out this email and, no. And I'm going to include this document and you have to email it back. Why are we doing that?
Yeah, the team's service adoption specialist and what Microsoft did internally too. And I've actually heard this for other organizations. And some of local examples here in Richmond too. People make posters and they put them up in the office and they'll do gamification and little, awards and things like that. So, but again, even with that, you're adding, like, there needs to be someone that is almost a little bit more marketing or creative minded in there, right? Even if it's inside the IT department, if it's a big IT department and you're coming from this angle and you're talking like, well, we're outside, so we have to go inside of the organization and we have to do all this stuff. But man, the way I talk to IT teams, they feel that way. Right? They feel like they may as well be a contractor in their own company sometimes, and they have to develop these relationships because they're so siloed away from all these other things that are happening in the organization. And when they ask for money and try to tell people stuff, the answer they get is very similar to what would happen with a consultant or someone that just doesn't even work there. They're just like, like.
Yeah. So you're hitting on two other roles that are important. A business analyst, someone who understands the technology enough, but they also can understand the business requirements of that solution. Because a lot of times if the development team is asking for something, then the business analyst has to also understand what's in it for the organization to use the technology, or why is it important, and being able to articulate value of how this solution is going to make people's jobs easier is important.
Yeah. The business analyst is one that I freak out about.
He loves talking about it. He does. He loves it.
I keep bringing up this story. I went and did a governance advisory workshop one day. The entire IT team was there. The CTO was in and out. They brought one marketing guy, and at the end of it, the CTO kind of looked at me and he's like, "So you've really opened my eyes towards the fact that we need to hire business analysts again." And what had happened was that do more with less mantra that IT organizations have been forced to live by for a decade, 2 decades almost. Like, they've removed the BA role because the BA is a cost center. They don't see that investment and they can't justify that investment.
Oh my gosh. And a good BA is going to be the person who just lays everything out so well for the development team that it's just so effortless for them to just knock out building the solutions very quickly. They're going to be the one that does the translation, of the like I said, the business requirements to the technical requirements. And if you have, and a developer can be the business analyst. I've seen it happen. I'm not saying that it's impossible, but I think it adds more work trying to do those translations. And I think that when you can bounce ideas from the business perspective and the development perspective, it helps to build a more well-rounded solution versus I've built this, this one button that does like 5 things behind the scenes, because from a technical perspective, I think that this sounds like a really good idea, but you haven't really thought about like what the value is, right? For adding all those extra steps that maybe that business user doesn't really care about.
Yeah. Well, and that's the way software used to be, right? It was like, oh, we want the users to have the options, buttons, everywhere, right? Like,
they want to be simple, stick figure simple.
Mhm.
Okay, so then I got to talk about another role.
Bring it.
The trainers.
Yeah.
Right? So,
I don't understand.
oh my gosh. So, if you do not have a training model that ties hand in hand with a support model, what are we doing? Right? So you have to make sure that the trainers can make sure that the business users understand how to use technology. For a very, very, very long time, we all know that people always said SharePoint was not very intuitive. They didn't understand how to use it. And if you don't have governance, they'll just do whatever, right? They'll throw up duplicate documents, or they'll have it checked out forever and they don't know they have it checked out to them.
Right.
And all these things happen.
Never. No, that's never happened.
So, and then there's
for non-SharePoint people, that means the document is locked and can't be edited by anyone else. Just a heads up. So, and users never know they did it, and they're like, no, whatever. No, I didn't do that. They'll swear they didn't do it. I didn't do it. I never did that. I never locked the file. And then, someone has to like take a screenshot of it, show them their own name on the file, and be like, you did it. Can you do it, please?
Right. No, I didn't realize.
Oh, that file.
Right. I didn't know you were talking about that file.
Sorry, continue.
No problem at all. But the trainers are important because people, like, they have to understand, they have to feel like they're being supported. Let's just start there, right? Because I think that either people will try to just figure it out by breaking the technology, or they will abandon using the technology, right? This is too hard. I'm not going to store my files in SharePoint and send people a link. I'm going to actually just attach the document in an email and send it, and then I have to have someone ask me again for the same document over and over again, right?
Yep.
Because I emailed it to them. So those types of things. And I do like gamification as well. I'm just, do I just keep going?
Yeah,
like,
you're doing great.
Well,
this
actually, no, that's perfect. So to segue into the gamification thing, because you just said something that really kind of hit me, is training is about making sure people feel supported. It's not just about running a webinar.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so it's a perfect, and so I was going to ask you, so other than running a webinar, what other kind of recommendations do you have to help people really get used to the tech and get and build adoption around it?
Sure. So usually the larger organizations will have a set schedule of all the training sessions that people can attend when they have time. So we do have like the end user trainings, and we kind of tailor the end user training for, I need to do very simple basic tasks with SharePoint. And what we're starting to see more, especially in the past couple months, is the people that were working with people, right? They weren't working with technology, is now being forced to use it more because we're working from home. And so those training sessions are just low level, understanding the basics. And then we'll do a higher level power user class for people who might have an understanding of the basics, but they might have more responsibilities. Like they might need to maintain their sites, or they might be an owner of a team and they need to manage those teams. From a gamification perspective, we have done like SharePoint Jeopardy. We also are kind of looking at some of the other tools, and I forget the names of them right now. Yes, I think one was Kahoot, and we also did the Poll Everywhere.
Yep.
Where we would kind of just at the end have a series of questions and people can kind of see the results on the screen at the end to do tallies of, what the results are. And it just kind of like reinforces what they've learned in those training sessions. And it's a lot of fun and people are very competitive.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah, I've been using Poll Everywhere. There was a period of time where I did some work with the SES Corps for the U.S. government, and we used Poll Everywhere in our presentations to get people to acknowledge that they were actually listening and get them start answering the questions and actually engaging. Because yeah, you sit down for an hour presentation, and by the end of the presentation, you're about like this. And so tools like Poll Everywhere, and I think Kahoot does it too, allow you to kind of pull that feedback in, especially in a world where we're all behind a computer screen and we're not in a room together anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
That's great.
So I kind of took us down a side path there, but you were talking about training, and that got me really excited. When it comes to the gamification and trainer area, is that the same person? Do you think there's a potential for a different, maybe not a different person, but a different role description for breaking apart training versus gamification versus adoption?
The first thing that kind of popped into my mind was knowledge management.
Okay.
And I think that popped into my mind because usually someone who is on the knowledge management team is going to have a holistic view of a lot of the initiatives around enterprise related priorities, whether it's enterprise search or whether it's having a central repository of how people interact with each other, whether it's we're using Delve profiles and people have to enter in their skills and their projects maybe, or just other ways that people can interact with each other and find others in the organization, especially a lot more now because we're not in the office with each other. So I think that could be another title that could be a good fit to fill in those gaps as well.
So just want to point out here too, we've talked probably about 5 or 6 roles at this point, and like 1 or 2 of them are like super techie.
Right.
So just touching on that, right? This is Buzzkill, right? This is what we're talking about. The important stuff. It is, technology is fun. It's cool. It's really important, and you can't have any of this productivity without it. And our really technical coder developer type people are super, super important, and they're amazing people. However, the soft skills, again, so important in all of this, right? Because if the end users can't figure it out and if they can't do it, then the technology doesn't mean anything, right? It's just, I wrote an article and I just said it's just toys. I mean, it is. It's like a game. It's just like a fun little software that does a little thing when you click a button. If people can't figure out how to be really productive with it, right? And the IT people have to be the ones to translate that and push it forward. It just makes total sense to me. So this is really, really interesting. It's a really good conversation, Amie. I really appreciate all your knowledge, and all of this stuff. It's great to see your experience, like throwing all this out there too. So what else, right? I know that was kind of a summary, but I didn't mean to conclude it. I don't think we're there yet.
And we're done.
But yeah, I know, right? But what else do you think of the team? I want to comment on something that you said in the last in our conversation, the last thing before this. I also saw a meme on LinkedIn, like right before we had the conversation, that hit it right on the head too. But it was like, if you're hiring like a tech person, that you're looking for somebody that has, cybersecurity skills, but also knows like Java and C++ and maybe like Azure Active Directory or identity management, and can also do 1 or 2 other things in HTML. That's not a person. That's an IT team, right? it's like, so, and you kind of touched on that. You don't want your IT person to be super overwhelmed, right? And you don't want to just have one tech person that's doing the tech stuff. But at the same time, if you're hiring people for those different roles, I guess where the summary of that would be, and I guess I would just look to you for an approval of this thought, that you want to have an understanding of the technologies and the kind of people that are using them. For instance, a front-end web developer is going to know a little bit more about how people think. Like you mentioned, you guys do WordPress for your public-facing sites. Very different kind of people a lot of times than someone that's just doing back-end code, right? And they got to work together, though.
Right. Yeah. And I think that what you're touching on.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I think what you're also, so there's 2 things that I was thinking about. One is the user interface. And someone who understands UX, UI design, and how the user is going to interact with the solution is going to be important. And when we shift over to the WordPress side of things, it's definitely about content structure, and it's about graphics, and it's about, you know, visually appealing designs. From the whole the idea of I want to lump all these skill sets into one, you know, there are people out there like that, and I have served in all those roles in my past times, but that person's probably not going to stay for long because they're going to get burnt out. It's demanding, and it is very overwhelming to be pulled in 50 million in one directions. And I think that there has to be a good balance, because when you just think about it, if you're spread thin, you're not going to do everything well. You're going to like touch on all these little things just to get the job done. You know, and something's going to end up getting lost, right? It's going to be, well, I didn't develop this solution very well, and it's kind of broken, but I had this other thing I need to this other thing that was a priority, and I had to put out this fire. You know, and I guess, you know, it kind of goes along the lines of like, who's screaming the loudest, right? Of, you know, is the system broke? I need to fix it. Or is it that, you know, my boss just asked me to do something, I need to go do that now. So I just think it's unrealistic for a company to have a one-size-fit-all person in a role. And I've seen it plenty of times. They want a SharePoint architect who can build, do custom development, and they want them to be the trainer, and they want them to be the business analyst.
Right. Yeah.
And then it's like, and then I'm going to pay you
I was going to say that person serves a good role in a uniting position between all of the people who are doing the very deep tasks. But what you said really hit home for me was it's very hard to focus on what you're trying to do and what needs to be done to drive progress, going back to that statement from before, if you are doing everything all the time.
Right.
So yeah, I love that. I love that statement that you need to give them support if you're going to have someone like that, because that's always been a role that I've been close to, if not running. But you're right. If you're going to have that role, you need to give them people to help accomplish it successfully.
Right. Exactly. Like if you have a lead that understands all of those aspects, fine. But I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. The support, or the person that's going to do the task. Like when you think about it, if you're writing code and you have to mentally keep shifting gears, you're never going to finish. Like,
yeah,
you have to like sit and focus and concentrate, which is why I don't write code anymore.
Hey, Amy, can you finish developing that web page over there? That graphic is like 2 inches to the left. Oh, sorry. Were you talking?
Right. And then a week later, it's what did I do? Mm-hmm. Like, have you ever had that before when you build something and then you come back to it a week or two later, or let it be a month later? What was I doing? What is this? You have to kind of like retrain your brain to remember. I mean, you might have created some documentation, but today. Maybe not.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, and that's it. That's it. And I think that touches on another point, is that this industry is there's a lot of demand. The IT people I mean, to a certain extent, they're all hired. I mean, and everyone is kind of stretched thin, and it's an industry where people are stretched thin. I think overall, I mean, I think that everyone feels like they're overworked in any job that they have, right? But like, really, when you hear about all the different initiatives that the organizations we talk to have going on and all that they're trying to get done and the deadlines and everything, you know, it goes back to the migration conversation of, you know, we've got, you know, several terabytes of just documents, and they're like, oh, we want to migrate it, you know, in the next 2 weeks, kind of a thing. And it's like,
going to happen.
Yeah,
it's unrealistic.
Exactly. And so
I mean, we're a software company, Hunter, and I would say for every maybe 3 conversations where a customer tells me they don't have budget, we get a conversation where they tell me they don't have time. They don't have time to talk about
Right.
a new tool. They don't have time to talk about something that's a nice to have. Even if it's not really a nice to have, it's a nice to have because it hasn't become on fire yet. So yeah, absolutely. The amount of overworked team members we have, I wonder how much of that is because we're putting the wrong responsibilities on people rather than hiring people to do those more specified jobs and putting too many generalist type roles on people. That's an interest. I don't know. Maybe did that make sense?
I think that hits the nail on the head.
Okay. I like how you're both like, yeah, that made sense. Now stop talking.
Well, no, but also like there's this aspect of I love this analogy. If you go to a mechanic and you say, my brakes aren't working, fix my brakes, I'm hearing a noise, they will fix your brakes, right? But if you go to a mechanic and say, I hear a noise, they'll diagnose the problem and actually fix what the problem is. Point is that the organization starts telling IT what to do, and they're not listening to IT. The organization is saying, fix my brakes, and IT is saying, that squeak ain't your brakes. And the organization says, I said fix my brakes. And they're like,
so
you pay the bills. Like
that's a really, 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 really good point that you bring up, because I do feel like internal IT departments are sometimes at a disadvantage because I need you to do this and my boss is telling me to do it.
Don't talk back.
Versus because we are brought on and as a consulting company, and if you ask us for, we need to have this particular thing done, we are always going to ask lots and lots and lots of questions in the beginning, especially before we even start touching things. And I think that, so there is, of course, the concept of good clients, right? Where they will trust that you are going to lead them down the right road if they are open to suggestions. So we were brought on board to build this intranet actually inside of Teams before Microsoft rolled out that they were having the intranet concept inside of Teams. But then we started actually having all these planning sessions and these strategy sessions. And we're not just talking about what you need right now. Let's talk about what you need long term.
Where do you see your intranet in 5 years?
Or how do you see people working, right?
Yeah.
So I love the concept of keeping people inside of Teams because that's where they're going to get their work done. But then they also have access to the authoritative company documents. I love the idea, but then what about the working places where people have to work with their colleagues or different groups or people outside the organization? So let's talk about, what the information architecture looks like now versus and based on the documents you have now. But let's talk about these other aspects that maybe you haven't thought about before, which is going to give it could have like a phased approach to how we build things. And then you have a strategy, right? And then we can talk about how the users can understand what you're delivering from end to end versus you told us we were doing this one thing and now we're confused because this other thing has come out. Like, no, it was all a part of the plan. And you can tweak the plan accordingly because things are always going to change, but at least you have some sort of direction.
Well, and that kind of brings it all together too a little bit. Sorry, Jake, go ahead.
I was gonna say what I wrote down while you were talking, Amy, was you need a consultant in your IT team. And I don't necessarily mean, although it'd be great for Amy's sake, right, that you bring in an outside consultant, but you need someone you can treat like a consultant. You can tell them what your problems are and let them talk to you about potential solutions and let them actually diagnose rather than simply react to a technical desire. And that really kind of like, so often, like you guys were saying, you don't get that role. That role doesn't exist. That role, you might get that role if you bring someone outside in, but if you're all internal, it is very rare you get a consultant role in an internal team. So that's really interesting.
And
Right.
it's great. And I think it speaks heavily to the importance of relationship building from the IT side of things that you see so often with our internal IT, where the IT team will be like, hey, do X, Y, and Z. And the organization is like, well, we'll write down your opinion. They hire a consultant. The consultant comes in. They spend a year, charge millions of bucks, and then the consultant's like, I think you should do X, Y, and Z. And they're like, well, good. Now I'm glad we have two opinions. It's like, look, I've seen that a million times.
Yeah.
And so
that's so bad.
Yeah. No, that's it. That's it. Well, I was just gonna say that what you were talking about before, though, it brings it all in home together, right? It's like that's a perfect example of you've got your kind of creative business consultant people, business analysts working with the organization on an ongoing basis to diagnose the problem before things get started. And then you've got, your project people that are making sure those meetings happen, that are continuing the buy-in from executive leadership to make it happen. And then you've got those people also communicating to the technical people, your developers, what's going to need to happen, what that looks like based on those requirements over time. And then, of course, the trainers are going to have to help with change management, get the organization to, to buy into that. And it seems like that's a pretty simple breakdown of how a project goes, but dissecting it to that level and having a specific example of it, again, it just goes to show how important having these different roles are. And again, what you touched on, the learning aspect of this is so important, because, where you guys, they wanted intranet inside of Teams, but, that was coming down the pipe. So you all, it sounds like you were able to kind of adapt to that, or at least catch it before it became too colossal or whatever. But the point is not necessarily that specific instance. It's just to harp again on the importance of learning. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. We're not going to let her talk about how that instance concluded, but we will. No, but you don't know. It's just to say you don't know. It just goes to show how important the learning of the technology is for everyone, and how important it is for the organizations to give someone in IT the time and the bandwidth to just sit there and learn, because it sounds like you're wasting money. Business analysts sound like you're wasting money, but what actually wastes money is just having technical people in your IT team who just develop solutions, and then the organization's approach to people using those solutions is email. Oh, you guys, you got the email, right? And that's the deal. And we still see that,
We do.
So, Amie, if I could kind of give you and I to building
We're just going to pretend
I
like he didn't freeze.
Yeah, he
It's
definitely
okay.
is frozen.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful face he's making there too. This is
Am
the
I
perfect podcast. That's what
It does look like he's saying, my beautiful podcast.
that's true.
Am I still frozen? I can hear everything you're saying.
I can hear you.
That's amazing.
There you go.
You can hear me now? But am I
Yes.
frozen?
No.
You kind of sound like a robot just a little bit
Robot,
from
yeah.
time to time. Now
Okay.
you're frozen again.
Now
You're
you're
pointing at your
That's
face.
Doing this. Yep.
beautiful.
Now you're back.
My face, by the way, is what was beautiful.
We're totally leaving this in the podcast. It's fantastic.
He's frozen.
Anyway, Jay, I think we can hear you now.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I'm frozen or not, I'll say my. So I was going to ask me if you could wrap us up, like when you're building an IT, huh? Terrible.
Amie, this is fun.
Oh boy, I'm just glad it's not my network.
I know, right?
That's all I'm saying. Just glad it's not me.
Aw.
I think you're back.
I think you are back.
You're moving now.
Am I back? Okay.
Yeah, you're good. Go ahead.
Okay. My daughter I could hear my daughter playing piano, and then the piano stopped. So I'm guessing what happened is she pulled her laptop out and started streaming her silly YouTube videos, and clearly I need better bandwidth quality. Anyway, going back to where we were. So Amie, if I were to kind of ask you to pull this all together, when it comes to building an IT team for your, whether it's your project or your ongoing management and of your environment, et cetera, you know, it sounds like you really need a diverse structure. How do you approach that? Like, how do you approach rejiggering your team? And that's probably a terrible word to use, but how do you approach that and figure out like the right path forward?
I think it depends on the effort. I think the bigger the effort, the more planning and structure you need. And it depends on the timeline. So of course we have some small projects. We have where and I say small as in maybe it's training services. And so you would need someone to develop the materials, and you would need someone to actually proofread and go through all the exercises to make sure everything fits just fine. And then you would still have to have, the person that is going to do the planning and scheduling of the training sessions and approve all the content. That can be a low effort of a team. But if you're going to do, I would say migrations, and it's terabytes of data, then you should definitely have the project team that we talked about with all those layers of different people, especially if, and I would say if the project is going to be 6 months, especially a year long, 2 year long project, definitely way more structure.
Okay. Cool.
It's really good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. This has been a really fun conversation.
Yeah.
We'll see how much I have to edit out in the end, like the 2 minutes of
I
me
think we
being...
should leave it. I thought it was a hoot. Amie and I had a good time. I'm sorry that you didn't,
Yeah.
but I think it's great.
Yep.
But this has been really fun. I've been kind of drafting a blog article to go with this as we talked, and hopefully the typing doesn't come up on the microphone too much. But I'm really excited to kind of pull this together, because this is, again, something that we talk about all the time, which is your IT team is not structured for you to be successful. And it's not a knock against the individuals. It's a knock against the approach that people are taking to IT. So it's been fun to kind of to draft out, like, what should you be considering? So thank you.
Thank you, Amie.
I really appreciate it. And this was a lot of fun.
I'm glad.
Good.
I'm glad. I had fun too. All right.
I'll hit stop recording, then you can tell us how it wasn't fun.
All right. This has been Buzzkill. Thank you so much, Jay and Amie. Again, I'm Hunter Willis, and we appreciate everybody for watching. Definitely comment on the video below if you agree with us. Comment if you don't. If you have any other suggestions or thoughts, leave those there as well. And we will see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.